So we're going to talk a little more as to how a lot of this filing works. Now, we had said electronically that 1096, and what the 1096 is, because we haven't covered that just yet, it's kind of, let's say, like a cover page would be the best way I can describe that, where the 1096, no matter what type of a 1099 you're sending, is going to give totals. So a 1096 electronically, normally, again, we can have all the way till March 31st. Unless you have that, again, 1099, miscellaneous box 7, or W-2s, then we have to, even electronically, do by January 31st. So you'll see that is kind of the main push, because those are the two most common types of way of information reporting. You can use a FIRE system. That means filing information returns electronically. Kind of a creative way to make it sound cool, I think, by calling it the FIRE system. But if you want to file electronically information returns and you're not using, let's say, some sort of a software that does that for you, that's already set up, you can electronically file directly with the IRS, and you can check that out at the fire.irs.gov site. Now, it's not just that you just click on the site and you're in and you start filing your forms. You do have to, like with anything, you have to set it up ahead of time. So right when you get close to the end of the year is not the time to do this. When you're earlier in the year, it definitely is the time to do that. So just look at your timing. I'm just going to give you kind of the lowdown on how that works. But if you want to check out IRS Pub 1220, it gives you all the requirements, all the procedures, kind of some of the even more detailed information than we're covering right here. But what they're really, just like if we look at trending, we see the push with more information reporting. They're also moving and pushing to require electronic filing for nearly all of the returns. So quantity of returns. I actually had one of my businesses breach this level. They just had so many different contractors they were working with, working on a big job, and they're going, well, how do we do this? Well, they had more than 250 information returns. They were required to file electronically. We're going to see probably in the future, my suspicion would be that we're going to see that threshold keep decreasing to where they want to try to, again, encourage more electronic filing. They'll probably move that down to force more electronic filing. The problem is if you are supposed to electronically file, let's say you have more than 250 information returns, and you don't electronically file, the penalty is going to be assessed per return. So let's say you had 300 and you want to file them by paper. You're going to get 300 separate penalties by not filing electronically. So it is important to at least pay attention to those thresholds, know how this works, and really it is great to file them electronically. It's a little bit simpler system in the sense that you're not having to worry about whether they're going to be processed by paper. So how do you go about it? You have to apply. You have to apply ahead of time. So 4419 is the form, and they do, changes up periodically from time to time as well. The 4419 form is the application for electronic filing. Now, you have to do this ahead of the due date. So if we know that the due date for filing most of these, if we're worried about the 1099 miscellaneous box 7, you'd have to have that set up at least 30 days prior to January 31st, because that's the due date. My recommendation is do that even more ahead of time. They say at a minimum, you probably want to go further. I would go 45 days, upwards of 60 days, maybe a couple months ahead of that. So if you were going to try to do this electronically by January 31st, you might want to be looking at this maybe in October would be a great time to do that. So know that you just need to do that ahead of time and far enough ahead of time that you aren't going to have a problem. Now, in the case of my example, my client who suddenly had that many, they had always been filing their own 1099s over the years. And they said, now what? We're supposed to do this electronically. What do we do? Well, here's where, again, we had kind of that hardship argument. We asked for an extension, so it gave them time enough to run through that application and get it set up so they could go ahead and do it electronically. They still could go ahead and provide the forms to the recipients properly on time by January, but they were stuck. They couldn't really do this electronically without getting penalized. So that's definitely an occasion where the extension comes in handy and where it was definitely helpful in doing so. You also have a requirement for a waiver. What is the requirement for a waiver? You can request a hardship waiver from electronic filing as well. And this is, there's a variety of reasons. The same thing is like doing an extension. And one of them is hey, this is the first time I really didn't know what I was doing type of a waiver from it, or it's burdensome. That's basically the idea of a waiver, is it's too burdensome to be able to take care of this. So use it sparingly, but there are occasions, especially at the first time ones, that they just really aren't maybe able to know that they're supposed to file electronically, or how to get set up or apply or so forth. So there is a hardship waiver. That's Form 8508. Again, you have to do this ahead of the due date. And you can only do this once. So you know ahead of time that you aren't going to be able to manage this. Now, the due date, if it's January 31st, when is it you have to file this 8508? That would be by mid-December. So you have to, hopefully, if you're working with the client, have contact with them ahead of time. We would have done the waiver had they not came to me like towards the end of January. Then we went ahead and did an extension in their case. But a couple different ways you can go, and it's nice to know that there is more than one way we can solve it, certainly. As far as how to file, now this is an important thing in how they work by paper. They are what we call red line forms. When we submit it to the IRS, there is a computer system that scans all these. And as they're scanning all these, it has to adhere to the right kind of preparation instructions. We have to do them in the right way, or those computer systems won't read those forms properly. So they are very particular in how they have to be laid out. And some of the seemingly simplest things that we may do, or computer systems may do, can actually cause those not to be able to read properly. So we can't use special characters. And a $sign, believe it or not, is a special character. So we can't put a $sign ahead of the digits in there. And then other types of things like apostrophe and number sign and sign. So out here where I live, there's a lot of fun things we deal with in our addresses, because everywhere here is all fractions. So those slashes are something that can be problematic, but then there's a lot of ands. Something, that we see a lot, 24 and a quarter. And those, even in the address, if the instructions are not requiring that, it's best to spell it out or leave those characters out. But even the simplest $sign is going to throw it where it may not be able to read those digits. You want to send the entire copy A. So what they mean by copy A, that's always the copy pretty much that goes to the IRS. So a lot of our 1099 miscellaneous ones, when you look at those, you'll see there's 2 to a page. Well, maybe you only have one 1099 you're sending. So the first one on that page has digits and information on it. The second one is blank. Well, they don't want you to cut that form or, get rid of it. They want that whole single sheet of paper. So even if it's blank, or even if it has it marked void, there's a little spot in there we can mark void if it's not supposed to be added in, or it had to be taken out for some reason. Send the full copy A, because they're going to run them through the computer system. And those red line forms are the ones that have to be submitted, or they won't be able to process it, and they would assert a penalty. So the other thing that we see is some of these have, if you get, let's say from office supply store, or you get your forms printed commercially somewhere, a lot of them will have like a little perforated strip over to the side. So it will run through your computer system and print all nice and neat. That perforated strip has to be removed, because in some cases the scanner they have isn't a standard sheet of paper size. I don't know why that is, but if that's the case, you remove the perforated strip as well before submitting. The full ID has to appear for IRS filing purposes on their red line copy. So that means the full federal ID number, the full names and addresses, and full social and everything. That has to appear on the IRS ones, but what they allow for, your copy as the payee, the copy to send to the one who's receiving it, is to truncate them. And truncating is where you can go ahead and take out all but the last 4 digits. So whether it's a federal ID number, whether it's a social security number, you want to put them in the same format. So if it's a federal ID number, you have like 2 X's at the first 2 digits, and the remaining X's except for the last 4 digits. If it's a social security number, it's the same formatting. So 3 X's, a dash, 2 X's, a dash, and the last 4 digits are what you're going to put on there. But on the IRS copy, that's the only one they require the full number, and everything else they do recommend truncating the rest of that number, so that it's more for ID theft and security, but that is something that is recommended in the instructions as well. What they want you to do when you're sending it is they don't want you to fold the pages. Again, what ends up happening is imagine like a scanning system. If you have wrinkles and folds and staples and such, then a lot of them may have issue reading that page. So they ask to send it in a flat mailer, to not fold the pages, and don't, staple or tear or fold any forms, because it does interfere with that ability. What they've done as well this year is they've changed up some of the addresses to file. We've always had where we can send them to Austin and Kansas City, but some of it may be just the volume of where they needed to scan these forms, is they added now a new address to Ogden. And what they did with Kansas City, so if you were used to sending there, just make sure and look at your instructions for 2018, is they've changed up the address a little bit for Kansas City. It's now a new P.O. box, and that changed the address just subtly. So with any year that you file, it's always good to eyeball that, even if you've done these, forever and ever, to just double check, because you don't want it to be hanging out there somewhere in space and not getting to where it's supposed to go. So there are 3 addresses now to file. And it's based on, where you're located, or, where the payee, or this person who's creating the 1099s, I should say, where they're located is where it is that you determine. So if you look at the instructions, it'll say if you're in this state, send here to this address, and it'll give you the correct address to send to each time. If you're sending a lot of forms, let's say that you have just so many forms, it's really not going to fit maybe in one small envelope. You want to send it in whatever conveniently sized package works, but you want to number them consecutive. And what you do, let's say that you have 200 forms, because we know if you have 250 for one business that you really should be doing that electronic, but let's say you have 200 of them. What you do is you place your form 1096 in package number 1. So it may say 1 of 2, 2 of 2. Your 1096 should be the very first document in the first package, so that it's right on top of all of them, and none of them stapled together, of course. You want to write your name on each of these packages and then number them. So if it was, for some reason, maybe you had 3, 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, etc. But that 1096 goes in package number 1 right on top. So that's like the start of their grouping, you can say. Postal regulations do require that it's sent by first-class mail. And you can use a private delivery service, which can provide proof of delivery, and this can come in very handy. And there's some reasons why you may want to consider doing this, and that has to do with we're not really going to get a ton into the penalties and mitigating those penalties. That's something we do a lot more in the third part. But if you have some sort of a private delivery service that you can provide proof of delivery, that goes so far whenever you're ever having to argue against a penalty because you did everything you were supposed to do. They're going to say, okay, great. Where's the proof? Can you prove that you delivered this? There are a lot of delivery services that are accepted. You can't just use any one of your choosing. It has to be one that's accepted. They do now at the IRS site under just the /PDS, meaning private delivery service, have a listing of those. They also have them in the instructions, the general instructions. Kind of a little aside is, and I don't know why this is the case, but every year the IRS site, when they go through and they update their information for the next year, they always point to just saying, yeah, or if you just Google, let's say 1099 instructions, or you're looking for one of them, for some reason they're always putting the next year on the site. It is a strange thing that I've seen now going for 3 years in a row. So if I just Googled 1099 miscellaneous, just as an example, it's going to bring me the 2019 forms, even though 2018 is right now what we're filing. So what I found as a trick is you go back and look for prior year forms, even though, again, it's not even a prior year, but I've given you, if you look through the manuals that we provided or in the slides, we've kind of made that a little bit easier where you don't have to do a whole lot of hunting. We've given you the specific URLs or the specific sites to get to so you can get to the correct instructions for the current year. But if you happen to do that and it surprises you, I don't know why that is, but it is a true issue I've seen on the IRS site going for 3 years. So you aren't losing your mind. It is that is just, for whatever reason, isn't the way the site's set up. So in the general instructions, that is general instructions regarding all different types of 1099s. This is a great one to look at each year, especially the what's new section of any instructions. And I recommend that, even if you've done like in my case, I've done this quite a few years now. It is always a good habit to go and say, oh, well, I'm going to go check out and see what's new for the year. Or, to read through. Those instructions are still helpful and valuable. So you'll see in there when it talks about private delivery services, but I can certainly recommend if you want to provide proof of delivery, it's a very small cost when you look at if that would help mitigate, let's say, a very expensive penalty down the line, because sometimes things happen. I've had an occasion, just another aside, but an occasion where we sent numerous 1099s for clients, all in the same, envelopes and done properly, and everything's, exactly like it should be. And for some reason, let's say you have 10 in one package, 8 of them go through and 2 of them are magically missing, and I haven't figured out why that is. So things happen. It isn't a bad thing to have the proof of delivery.